Hey y'all, it's Brandon with Voodoo Forge. Now, I'm going to be talking a lot. I've got a couple of project videos ready to go, but this is a video I needed to make and get out there. So I want to talk about the man that gave me my Anvil. Now, David Lamon is who gave me this, and I met Lewis in January of 1996. When I was still at MTSU, I started working at a commercial cave in McMinnville, Tennessee. And I met a lot of characters there. Made some of the best friends I've had my whole life, but Louis was one of them. Now, Lewis was from Indiana. He was born in 1934. Yeah. And he grew up in Indiana. His family had owned a hardware store for several generations. And his father was in one of the early cavers in organized caving in America, and he got Lewis involved in it. Well, in the mid-1950s, Lewis was in the Army, and he'd already been to McMinnville some before that with his father, but after that he came back down full-time when they started commercializing the cave. And him and his father both put a lot of work into that. Now, what a commercial cave is, it's like a tourist cave. But this particular one that I'm talking about is a little short stretch that's tourist cave, and then there's well over 20 miles of cave that is not developed. So there's a lot of different cave there. And some of those early guys that were there were pretty interesting. Lewis was one of them. Well, him and his father, like I said, worked there, and they ran miles of wire. They did a lot of blasting. They did carpentry. They did plumbing work. They discovered some passageways and things. They discovered one thing, which is named after them, called Lamon's Loop, that every commercial tour of the cave still goes down through. They discovered that passageway. Well, Lewis came on full time and moved to the property and actually lived on the property pretty much almost for the rest of his life. He lived there when I met him back in the 90s, and he was the he was the do everything guy. You know, he knew where all the switches were in the caves. He knew, you know, that we had these little Willis Jeeps, flat fenders and stuff that we'd drive down in the cave that would fit down in there in the commercial sections, and he took care of those. And you know, you're talking about Jeeps that are being driven by 16 to 22-year-old guys. So I mean, that's a job in and of itself. All the electrical in the cave, the plumbing, the new construction, maintaining everything. There were a couple of little dozers and a bobcat and all that equipment and everything. Just Lewis was on top of it. He was, I think, his last official job title was the operations director. Now, Lewis's shop was something, there are a few of them left like this, but not many. It was, you could tell the original building and where it started growing, and how anytime they had a need for another project, the shop got a little bigger. And it was down on the ground. It's a dirt floor with one big huge bay and a barrel heater, double stacked 55-gallon drum heater, and in the corner was his little desk. Now he had an office up at the ticket office, but he had a desk down there, and it was a big old tanker desk. This is before the internet, and he had a paper catalog for everything you could imagine that you might possibly need for an operation like this, which was everything from blasting supplies to light bulbs. And he had this weird, this is one thing I never understood, he had this weird thing. If he took a part off of a vehicle or something, so it's a worn out part, he would put it in the new parts box and write the date on it and put it on the shelf. So he had all that, and then all the stuff from his family's hardware company. After that closed down, you know, he moved down there. So it's just all kinds of things, you know, hanging from the ceiling. There were Coleman lanterns and coal oil lanterns and belts off of equipment that hadn't been manufactured in 70 years, and every kind of tool you could imagine. Plumbing, electrical, carpentry, mechanical, digging, Everything you could imagine in the shop. It was such a neat place. And then you went up this little set of stairs, and it was the wood shop up there. And he had that there you go, antique craftsman table saw and joiner they used those to build the ticket office with rough cut lumber, and they were deadly. They were very dangerous. But he didn't only stay in the shop. Lewis knew where every light in the cave was. You could go into a room that had, more than 100 light bulbs. They'd be like, the light over there is out behind that rock. He'd know exactly where it is. He always wore an MSA Comfo cap, which is a miner's cap, and a wheat light, which is a big lead acid battery with the cord that goes up to the light. And that was Lewis. And he knew, like I said, the amount of information he had on the cave and the operations there just couldn't be measured, because he was there from the genesis of it. Now, Lewis also worked on other commercial caves with one of the founders of Cumberland Caverns, so he got to work his magic in several places. And there really is a lot to what they were doing. I don't think it could be done anymore, but at that particular point in time, it was a fine line between conservationism and the tourist industry, and they did it. They brought people into caves and kept them in as good a shape as they could, if that makes sense. Now, as far as Lewis dealing with the young folks that were guides there, he would stay on us. Yeah, he never really got on to anybody in a mean kind of way, but he'd let you know if you were driving the Jeeps fast, or if there were cigarette butts that needed to be picked up. The light switches in the cave, because you got a commercial cave, people are walking through, there's going to be a lot of light switches, because you can't just leave the lights on. So they were on this little push button light switch, and they had figured out that the humidity would get in there, so they had to have a little heater in each light switch box. Well, we were lazy, so we'd like to step on the light switch just to turn them on and off. They were on the ground or near the ground. You'd step on it, and you could go into the next room and then step on it. Well, that would tear the light switches up. He'd let us know about that awful quick. Okay, now Lewis didn't spend all his time working, and there were a lot of fun things about Lewis when he wasn't working. He had his feet gave him awful problems. And he had these orthopedic boots that they looked like some kind of World War II jump boots. They came about halfway up his calf. They were lace-up boots. And he wore those all the time, which might not have been that strange, but he also he had a 18-speed or 10-speed bicycle that he loved to ride. And he'd wear those boots. And he also really liked to swim. He liked to go down to the swimming hole we had there on the Collins River, and he'd get in. He'd swim up the river until you couldn't see him. Then he'd swim down the river and he'd come back. Well, he liked to wear a Speedo when he went swimming. And he'd ride his bicycle down to the swimming hole. So it wasn't uncommon to be coming up to the swimming hole or coming up the cave road in general and encounter Lewis in those big old boots and a Speedo on a bicycle whipping down the hill. So, but he didn't care. He did how he did. He would make the best homemade ice cream and bring it up. We'd have guide meetings and stuff, and he would bring that up. His pancakes were not that good. Those were the heaviest pancakes in the world. But we, as I got older, we'd have a beer or two every now and then. He never had more than one or two. He'd even make the comment, well, you keep putting them back there, I'd end up on the floor. Let's see, we watched a band of brothers together, played Risk, solved multiple of the world's problems. Slideshows. Lord, Lewis had slides of everything that ever happened in those caves, and some of his slideshows were pretty good. Some of them, like when he was going through a bunch of slides and didn't know what was in there. Well, here's another picture of the exact same thing you just seen 8 of. Anyway, he had a lot of fun. He was very influential, to a lot of the guides. He He was active in his church, very active in his church. He never married. He was a single man, confirmed bachelor, as he used to put it. He would tell me every once in a while when one of the ladies would get after him. Anyway, on to the Anvil and the blacksmithing tools. Lewis went to Silver Dollar City, and he saw that they had a blacksmith shop on the property, and he thought that was the neatest thing. So at some point in the 60s, there was a blacksmith shop on the other side of Harrison Ferry Mountain from the cave. And they made a deal with Lewis. It was an old blacksmith shop. They were tearing it down. They didn't want it anymore. And they made a deal with Lewis. If he came over with the bulldozer and bulldozed the shop, he could have anything out of there that he wanted. So he went and he got all the tools. And this anvil, which it's a 107-pound Peterite, was one of those tools. And he always wanted a blacksmith shop up at the cave. Well, when he found out that I'd gotten into blacksmithing many years after he got these tools. This anvil had been sitting in his shop. You know, we'd all used it to straighten something out on. He found out that I was into it, and he wanted to know if I wanted all the blacksmithing tools up there. So yeah, of course. And it wasn't just this. There were several ridiculous tongs for making wagon tires and stuff that I'll never use, but I've got them on my tong rack, and I'll keep them forever. Hardys, things like that. And Lewis got to come up here to my shop once and watch me work. And then they have, or they used to have, well, they still do. It's only a different name, but they have concerts in the big room of the cave now. And I would go up there, and did for several years, and set up to demonstrate and sell stuff at those. Honestly, mostly so Lewis could see somebody blacksmithing at the cave. So anyway, Lewis is a big reason as to why I was able to get started in blacksmithing and get where I'm at. And we lost Lewis Sunday, January 17th, 2021. And so I just wanted to tell y'all a little bit about Lewis and what he's meant to me and his influence has been on me. And kind of just thinking of Lewis, this was his brand. So yeah, he was of that generation. So I figured I would just have a drink to Lewis. And as Lewis would say, sigh. All right, y'all behave yourselves.